welcome to this edition of the Filmmaker's Life. I just wanted to say that even though I don't have it hanging right behind me, this is a Haitian veve. It's a particular art form that belongs to Haiti. It's actually a spiritual, it's for spiritual purposes. And I thought that I wanted to show my support of our Haitian community, given what's going on in America right now. Yes. But I don't have it hanging right, but it's there, watching over us. So today on the Filmmaker's Life, I will, as always, be interviewing a filmmaker who has already made films and has already started down the path of filmmaking. And the reason that I do this podcast is because I find that there's very little information for filmmakers about really how to get started and how to get going with their filmmaking career. So I'm very, very excited today to introduce you to one of my fabulous clients, Marci Krown. And whenever I get to have one of my clients on the podcast, I enjoy it even more than when I talk to a filmmaker I don't know, because I already know so much about you and your work and from working together. So it's super fun for me. And I always like to start with the same question. And my first question is, when did you realize you were a filmmaker?
Well, thank you. First of all, thank you for having me on the podcast, Joanne. It's nice to see you again in a different matter. And Emily, and I see Innocent is here. Thank you. When did I decide that I was a filmmaker? When I made my first short. I made my first short 7 years ago. It's been 7 years. I can't believe it. And you know, they say to make a film that fits your passion so that you can be very interested in seeing it through. And that's when I knew.
So I think what you're describing, and tell me if I'm wrong, but I think maybe you were a filmmaker who came to film because you had something you wanted to say. Would that be correct?
Yes, well, I started acting 12 years ago, and I thought I could make a difference in acting. I still feel so. But then I found out about filmmaking, and I thought, gosh, what a way to make an impact with a bigger audience, you know, and to give my message. And my mission really is to provide family-friendly films. I thought, here, I'm in San Diego, and I didn't see too many family-friendly films. And so I thought, okay, that's something that I'm passionate about, because at the time my son was young and I wanted to provide something that I had an interest in and that he could watch. And that's, yeah.
Tell us about the story. I forgot completely that you started out acting.
Yes.
You know, I have several clients who come from acting into film, but you were already making films by the time I met you, so I forgot that that's actually how you started. So what was that first short film you made? What was that about?
Yes, it was, the film was called Thank God for Jelly, and it was geared towards the 8 to, I guess, 12-year-olds. And it was a story about a little girl who loved her jelly on her toast that she had for breakfast every morning. And she wanted to thank the person who made it. So she went on this journey with her brother and her 2 friends and her stuffed rabbit, Snugglebuggle, who was animated only in her eyes. Only she knew it was animated. And they went to find the person that made the jelly. And it covers the themes of gratitude, of friendship. And the reason I did make it is I wanted to have something for those people that didn't go to Sunday school, or they weren't affiliated with a religious place, that they could watch this film with their parents and have a discussion about the values of gratitude. And that was what I made it for.
That is so cool. And you are so correct that there are very few films for family films made for children. Very few. And Emily made a film with her daughter in it when she was how old? She was 6 or
Oh,
less.
she was less. She was less. She was, gosh, it was 20. She was 5. She was still 5.
5.
She turned 6 later that year.
Yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
Perfect age.
But it's just interesting that so many filmmakers don't really think about making films for children, you know, that have children in them. So
Oh,
and
yeah.
then when it comes to feature films, there's an absolute lack of children's films or family films. And to the point that sales agents that I know will call me up and say, "Hey, do you have any family films?" Because
No,
it's
I
so
love
rare.
that. And after taking your class and going on to do 2 more shorts, I remember your question was, well, why not do a feature? I'm like, oh, okay.
Oh
Why
my God, I am so cheeky.
not? And so you were really instrumental in helping me change that mental attitude of, well, I've done 3 shorts. Why not apply what you've learned to do a feature?
Well,
It's different. It's different.
before we get to the feature, with your next 2 shorts, because I know
Yes.
something of the path you've gone on. So
Okay.
what were the next 2 shorts that you made?
The next one was called Wishful Thinking, and it was about a middle-aged couple who were kind of lacking in communication. And so the wife decided to play a joke on her husband by getting him to her workplace, which was she was an actor and a caterer, and he was unbeknownst to him, he became part of the story. So it was like a story within a story.
Nice. And then what was the third short?
The third short was a short documentary called Making a Difference in Their Community, Dave's Rock Garden. And it was about a hero who turned this trash-filled homeless area of a plot that was owned by the city into a beautiful rock garden that everybody from around the world comes and enjoys. So he made a difference in his community because he got the businesses and the people together. And this was going on during COVID. It was going on during COVID, so we were all in masks during interviewing and so forth. But it was important to know that if you feel helpless about something, there is always going to be somebody that is doing something to make a difference. You don't have to, it doesn't take a whole amount of people. One person can make a difference in your community. And that's what I wanted to showcase.
Wonderful. And so, given that you really liked acting and you made these 2 fiction shorts, what do you think turned you over to documentary world? What was the inspiration for that?
Oh, it's true. True stories that and I hope to have picked somebody that another person can relate to, and that they could relate to and be inspired and to be challenged in their own lives in whatever it is that they do. And so I thought, it's really interesting to share a real story about people.
I just wonder if, after making fiction, is it possible that you started to see that these true stories were more exciting to you?
It's a different animal, Joanne.
Yes.
When you're doing a documentary versus a narrative feature, a documentary, I mean, I believe both have pluses and minuses. With a documentary, with a narrative, you're going by a script. With a documentary, you have an outline, but you've got leeway to go elsewhere. And that, I think, if you're flexible as a filmmaker, you want to capitalize on those elsewhere. Like in my mind, I had an outline. These are the people I'm going to talk to. This is what I'm going to ask, and so forth. But once you start your interview, you realize, oh, they're bringing up something, someone that I should really talk to. I really need to include them because they're a part of that person's story, and I think they'll make a difference in the whole story. So it actually leads you in a different way, and it could be very positive. So you have to be a little bit more flexible, I believe, when you're making a documentary. Whereas everything is written in your script and you follow it and you block your shots according to that. So you have to be a little bit more flexible with a documentary, but they're both different animals, and I do like both. I'm looking forward to that one day where I'm going to be doing a narrative for my next film, or maybe documentary. I don't know. I love the documentary so much.
If you were going to make a fiction feature, what role would you play? Would you act? Would you direct? Would you produce? What would you do?
Oh my goodness. With my first movie, this Thank God for Jelly, I was a director and then I also acted. And I found that very challenging because when you're directing and then, okay, it's time for your role, get in, change your uniform and get in. And I still have my director's hat on. And you can't have a director's hat on when you're engaging with the other person. So I talked to a lot of people, how did you actually direct and act at the same time? And they said, well, they had a really good AD. They had a really good assistant director who knew their vision, so they were able to act. But, I don't think I would do both. Honestly, I think I would separate that after my experience with just a small role. I think either I would hire a director, hire an AD, and be an actor in the next film, or some part of the crew, maybe the producer side, and then, have a director. I did that with my second film. I hired a female director. I thought it was important to have a female slant on the views of the film. And you're giving up, you're giving up what to somebody else, and you got to allow them to direct how they feel, so they have that experience in directing while they see the vision.
Absolutely.
It's hard, but you gotta do it.
So I'm so glad that you brought up that I was the one who said to you, why don't you make a feature? Because, I'll say all kinds of things to people and I never know who's going to take that ball and run with it.
Yeah.
And you really, really have run with this
Yes.
documentary feature that you made. So before you tell us a bit about the film, can you just tell me how you got into this world and what is so exciting to you about this world? I think one of the most amazing things about documentaries is that a documentary film, either for the audience or for the filmmaker, takes us to a place we might not have access to. And that's what your film did for me. So tell us a little bit about how you came across this world.
Sure. Well, for those who aren't aware, the title of the film is called The Power of Sports for Amputees. And I had worked the 1996 Paralympic Games back in Atlanta. And the reason it stuck with me is that my perceptions changed about those with disabilities.
But what even had you go and work the Paralympics Games? I mean, something took you there, right?
Well,
What had you do that?
living in Atlanta, living in Atlanta
right.
and hearing about the games, I volunteered a lot to network in a lot of different sports events.
Mm,
And so I heard and learned, but I didn't experience it. So it's one thing to hear and learn, but it's a
right,
difference to be right there and working with those
right.
with the disabilities. So I really didn't know what it was going to be like until I met athletes, until I met other people who were non-athletes with all kinds of disabilities. And I was struck by that and thought, and I wasn't even going to be a filmmaker. This was years ago.
Uh-huh.
My background is in event planning. And so,
Oh,
yeah.
that's very important. I don't know if you know this, but years ago I did the AIDS ride, which is we rode from San Francisco to LA,
Oh,
545 miles.
wow.
And the year that I did it, there were 2,200 riders. The event raises something like $20 million. You know, there were
Wow.
2,200 riders, but it was a 7-day event. So every night we had to show up at a campsite. And for most of us, there were tents for us that we had our own tent. We put up our own tent, but we had to have a number for the campsite and all that. We had to have showers. We had to have food. So the team that moved to this city was, I think, about 4,000 people.
Wow.
And as an event planner myself, that's what maybe as an event planner myself, at night, instead of going and resting after riding, 100 miles
Oh,
that day or whatever, I'm walking around the back of the showers and going like, how are they doing this?
yeah. Yeah. It's hard. It's hard not to be aware when you do. Yeah, I could imagine.
Yes.
I could
So I can
imagine.
imagine going and as an event planner, going and being at the Paralympics and being wowed
That was the
because
biggest event that I was involved with. That was
ah,
incredible.
now I'm
So,
connecting all the dots.
yes.
Now I
So,
get it.
yeah. So with my love of sports,
Yes.
my interest in disabilities, which today still, um, there's still issues regarding people with disabilities and ableism and obstacles and so forth. I thought, you know what? I do know something about that since I've worked with it and my love of sports. That's what I did. I did plan many sporting type of events.
Aha.
And I thought, I'm going to combine the two, you know, and make it a feature. Like you said,
Yes.
feature. So that's what I
Yes.
did. Put my
And what was it about this crazy suggestion that I made that enticed you and you thought, oh, you know what? Why not? Why not make a feature?
oh my gosh. I had no idea what I was getting into, Joanne. I had no idea. But you know what? Instead of looking at, oh my gosh, look at all that I have to do, I said, wow, I mean, this is incredible. And I'll just take it one part at a time, one step. Know what each step is leading to the next step, and each step is going into the final. And, it was definitely, it's a different animal than a short. But I recommend that for everybody to at least get a short under their belt before they do start a feature. Because it does give you that foundation. If you can make a short, you can make a feature. You just have to
Yes.
think about other things that you don't need necessarily for a short. And well,
That
distribution is one of them. So
what what you just said should be my mantra. If you can make a short, you can make a feature. I love
right.
that.
Yeah.
Well, just to answer my own question about, well, what enticed you, I do think that what a feature can do is it can have a greater impact. And I know that's really what motivates you.
Yes.
Um, it's about having that impact. And the other thing that I tell filmmakers in a general sense is that a feature film is really the entrance to the industry. So a feature is something that you can get distribution for shorts, but to get distribution for a feature that's actually an income generator, that's a different level. And that's what I think is important. But I think that with a film like yours, which has a very specific, important message
Mhm.
that can go further when you have a feature film. What is the message of your film? There may be multiple, so.
Sure. Well, the message is that because I'm interviewing amputees, the message is let's look at their abilities, not their disabilities.
Mm,
It's the abilities of these athletes. What's important is for these athletes to know, or people to know, that there's resources. Still, there's a lot of amputees, a lot of people who are amputees that don't know about the resources out there. You know, they're in hiding, and my goal of this film is to get them out, come out and try a sport. There's grants in place because insurance doesn't cover the cost of certain prosthetics, and that's an obstacle. So my goal is to make the community aware of resources and grants, and there's networking in a community, and also for the non-disabled is what we call it, that we've got to stop putting these obstacles in their way. You know, they're trying to do something every day that we do, and then we get inspired because they do it. It's like it sort of doesn't make sense. We're inspired because they overcome the obstacles that we put in their way. So the message is twofold in that way.
yes, I think I think that the stories of the athletes are super inspiring. Then I think that one of the things I got when we were working on this film was that the story of the prosthetic devices
Mm-hmm.
is also inspiring
Mm-hmm.
because those things are amazing,
Oh gosh.
absolutely amazing, right? So
Right.
there's that, and you actually with your film, you actually spoke to some of the companies that make them, right?
Yes. Yeah, that's so important because just like everything else, technology has a chance
Yes,
to improve
yes,
all these things. And it's amazing what they're able to do. Yeah, and I thought that was important for the film, for people who not only are they not aware of amputees, but what is the tools? What are the prosthetics about? How are they made? You know, oh, there's different styles, there's different feet, different knees, different materials, depending on if you're a competitive athlete or not,
mm-hmm,
or
mm-hmm.
depending on your sport. So technology's come a long way, even in prosthetics.
Yes. And then, so there was this thing about the athletes, there was this thing about the companies. And then another thing that really struck me that you taught me about. I get to learn all this fabulous stuff from my clients. Um, but another thing you taught me about was that I'm not sure if it's provided by the companies or where it comes from, but there are lots of opportunities for amputees to access those prosthetics, which otherwise are incredibly expensive.
Mhm.
That's another part of your film?
Exactly. Exactly. There's um there's a grassroots movement called So Everybody Can Move. And in each city, um, well, I guess it started in New Mexico with trying to meet with the Congress people, meet with the legislative people to explain to them, why aren't these things covered? It's actually discrimination if you're not covering it. Because if you can bring an able-bodied person back, let's say if they've broken their leg, if you can bring them back from, to the best version with physical therapy and surgery and walkers or whatever they need to succeed, why can't you do the same for somebody who is actually missing their leg? If they've lost their leg, why can't you bring them back to the
Hmm.
best version of themselves so that they can thrive in life? And so insurance companies, what aren't going to cover that? Why not? That is discrimination.
Mm.
That you're
Mm.
not providing something that they need. It's not a luxury. It's something that they need. And that's the point. So there's about 10 states now. So some have started this year, some will start next year, and they're going to provide some of the cost of these prosthetics to people who want to compete in various sports. Yeah.
Wow. So you were involved in moving the
I was
legislature
not
in these
involved, but I
states?
interviewed somebody who is.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah.
fantastic. That's really amazing. So, there was a film made by somebody I know in San Francisco. Am I going to remember his name? No. Anyway, he directed a film called Crip Camp.
Oh,
And
yeah.
Crip Camp,
Sure.
I'm not sure if it won an Oscar or was nominated for an Oscar or something like that.
I'm sure it won an award in one of their festivals, many awards. Yes.
I'm pretty sure it was nominated for an Oscar.
Yes.
And Crip Camp, if Emily, if you can find the guy's name who directed it, but anyway, he is a paraplegic,
Mhm.
and that may not be everything, but anyway, the movie documentary Crip Camp is really based on a lot of footage that he shot when he was about 14 years
Yes.
old, or less. And he went to this camp that some very well-meaning young people put together for disabled children. This was back in the 60s. And they put this camp together and they didn't know the first thing. That was one of the things that got
I
me
know.
about that movie.
It was funny. It's funny, but yeah, they did it.
Those kids, they didn't know a thing. Somebody had an idea. Hey, let's put on a camp for disabled kids, And so that the people in charge didn't know what they were doing. So all these disabled kids got together, and James Lebrecht, thank you so much, got together and had the time of their lives because they got up to a lot of mischief. But though a lot of those kids in that camp went on to be the people who got the American Disabilities Act
Exactly.
in place.
Yeah, Judy, her name is Judy. She was one of the main people. Sorry if I'm mispronouncing Newmeyer, or Judy was extremely big in advocacy for that. And I think that is incredible. And
Yep.
I'm hoping that this film will start some of that as well.
Well, I just remembered it in this context of legislative change,
Yes.
because I'm sure that many other countries, I'm not sure what it's like. Emily's in Trinidad, Innocent is in Nigeria. I'm not sure what it's like in other countries, but here, because of that law, I think that was passed in the 70s, maybe. But there, especially in public buildings, you must provide access to people with disabilities. And there are laws around jobs. You must provide people with disabilities, accessibility. On my phone, I have this funny thing on my phone, and nobody understands. I have this circle here.
Yeah.
It's an accessibility thing. And I got it years ago when I had a broken phone, and it was the only way I could work it. And I've never taken it off. I always have this little accessibility tool. But so it's this whole world. Again, it's like you're inviting us into this whole world, from the athletes to the companies that make the prosthetics to the legislative change that can happen. So now that you've finished the film, what's next with the film? What's happening next?
Well, I think it's important to bring this film to the communities first before I actually go into distribution online. Bringing the films to the communities and submitting to film festivals. And I'd like the films to be in the communities, because then, I could meet, if I can do it virtually or in person, I could meet the people in the communities. I can get them involved, them, interested, the community's interested. Um, I think it's more of a bonding, and more of a, I don't know what you call it, just more of a togetherness, what you call it. And you know, that's important to me. And along the way, perhaps using it as a fundraiser so that there can be money that goes back to one of the organizations in that community that's providing services for amputees. I think that's really important. That's something that I did here in San Diego when I showed the film after it was completed to my friends and family. I had a fundraiser, the silent auction, and the money specifically just for the silent auction went to 3 nonprofit groups, you know, the Challenge Athletes Foundation, Angel City Sports, and the Amputee Coalition. And they are big in the you know, in the trenches, helping amputees with resources and so forth. So I think that's important to give back to those communities while you're showing the film, and to get other people aware in the communities about these organizations that are helping, and maybe they'd like to be involved too. So I think it's twofold being there.
How do you feel as an able-bodied person making a film about disabled people? How do you feel that you play a role there?
You know, advocacy comes in all forms. You can be able-bodied, you can be disabled, you know, you could, you know, there's a lot of hidden disabilities, and you know, not everybody speaks about it. So able-bodied people may not be all able-bodied.
Right.
You know, you just because they don't have, they're missing their arms or legs, or they're not in a wheelchair, maybe they've got some other attributes that but they may not qualify themselves as disabled.
Right.
So really it's advocacy on all levels. It doesn't matter if you're able-bodied or not. I thought about that. It's like, how do I relate? You know, how do I relate? And you know, I can relate. I can relate with loss. And everybody who loses, let's say if they lose an arm or a leg, they go through a loss. It's a grieving process. So you know, it's not the same. It's definitely not the same as an actual limb, but I become empathetic to the situation, and you know, I'm a big cheerleader because I see I see what can, you know, what they can do. And
yeah, and it you know, it's often referred to as allyship. But I just thought of that question because you were saying about giving back to the communities that, you know, you're telling these stories about. But it's an interesting role being a story. I met this, and I so want to find her. I don't know how I lost her, but I met this lady from India, and she became a filmmaker because she had a story to tell. And the story was about rock climbing. So she is an Indian female rock climber. What? You know, in international competition. And because she just thought this was such a great story, she started telling the story. So she is one of the people she's making the story about. And I think in the documentary world, there's a lot of discussion about who gets to tell whose stories. But I totally agree with you that anybody can be an advocate. And you know, you certainly are. So you said that you want to show the films in the communities. Who are the perfect audience for your film, do you think?
I think those who are amputees for sure. And then people who like documentaries, people who are interested in sports, people who like you know, making a difference in their lives. There's a certain group of people you're gonna find.
Yes.
You know, I think if you like volunteers,
Yes.
You know, people who volunteer. Yeah, and there's a whole slew of people who are into documentaries. You either like documentaries or you don't like documentaries. And so I think people who really enjoy documentaries and sports, you know, on a grand scale. I don't think your average football player, if they're not familiar, I hope they would become interested. But I'm talking about grand scale sporting events.
Yes. Yes. Oh yeah, that would be great to have the film showing somewhere where there's a sporting event that's for able-bodied people. That would be an
Mhm.
interesting way. But I'm really sort of leading into talking about the concept of an impact campaign. I'm teaching a class today and tomorrow
Okay.
around documentary filmmaking, and my last section is going to be on impact campaigns. But I do think that your film is perfect for an impact campaign. And by that, I gave you this example the other day. I think it was you, that I made a film one. It was just like a 5-minute piece
Mhm.
about, and I tried to get in as many of the arts organizations located on Miami Beach as possible.
Okay.
And the piece was made for a commission meeting. So the Miami Beach Commission, maybe 9 members and a mayor, were having a meeting, and they were going to vote on a line item for the arts in the Miami Beach government budget. So I made my fundraising piece, showed it. The place was packed with artists of all kinds. When I saw 2 commissioners wiping tears from their eyes, I knew we had won, and we got a unanimous vote. And my 5-minute fundraising film has been worth millions and millions and millions of dollars to Miami Beach artists.
Wow.
So,
Congratulations. That sounds fabulous.
yes. And, so impact doesn't have to be showing it to 1 million people. I
Mhm.
showed it to 10 people.
Wow.
And so when you brought up about legislation and so
Mhm.
on, I was thinking about that. So who do you think most needs to see your film?
I think corporations, business corporations who are maybe saying that they have diversity and equity in their businesses, but what does that mean exactly? You know, I found some that are okay, they've got diversity in race, in gender, in sex, sex, maybe even religion. But unfortunately, disability is not included in that diverse group of people. So I think, and that's an untapped resource as well. That's untapped. And you want to bring in somebody who is familiar with the interest of those who are disabled, because that could bring a lot of knowledge and a lot of accreditation to the company if they are catering to the needs of their constituents, in the community. So people in corporations that maybe want to have a more diverse plan in terms of their product. I think people who yes, definitely amputees who are afraid to go and come, and be in mainstream. Um, a lot of it is mental. There's a lot of mental attitudes, perhaps psychologists, people who are involved in who, you know, sporting clubs, people who deal with the public that where amputees may be coming, sporting clubs, uh, community parks, um, YMCAs, people anywhere where you're gonna be doing programs that you can cater to, amputees.
Yes, yes. The first idea you had about the corporations reminded me. So I have a client, Jimmy Okabanjo, who made her first feature film, with me, and it looks at the worst kinds of toxic racism and sexism at the highest levels of the corporate world. And she now works with corporations who want to have diversity, but are not necessarily, and Innocent knows a lot about this. If you want to jump in and add anything about that, I would be really happy to hear. But the corporate world has great difficulty. So I'm just talking about her film, but the corporate world has great difficulty retaining Black women and women of color because the racism and the sexism is so intense that they're leaving.
Sure.
Right. So a corporation has a problem on the front end of they got to hire people and they want to hire the best people. And then retention is a real challenge. So it's slightly different, you know, with your population, but I feel as though corporations could really need to see your film and hear what you have to say. Have you considered the possibility of putting together some educational materials to go with the film?
Yes,
Oh,
I
good.
have. I have. And I think it would be for those people who would want to. And this would be something that I would work in partnership with one of the other nonprofit organizations that deal with these issues day in and day out. I'm not an expert per se on some of those issues that, you know, that the companies are dealing with, but you bring in, you know, no need to recreate the wheel. Bring in the partners that are out there, bring in the organizations that are out there to work with you. And that not just with the educational tools, and I mean that with making your film as well, but bring in the partners that will help you put together this educational tool so that they could give something to the company's employees on maybe something to think about, questions to ask, how they can benefit, what they can do to make it more inclusive, even with the hiring practices. Are they providing accommodations? Well, they're not accommodations, they're necessities for people who might need them. So there's companies that will do that. There's companies that will go into your organization, whether it's a restaurant, whether it's a hotel, and look and see, you know, how does it rate? Are they set up properly for somebody, let's say, who's in a wheelchair, and do they have the automatic buttons on their door? Do they have, you know, the bathroom wide enough so that they can get access? There are people that will come in, organizations that will come in and help, you know, and then you implement those things. You
do an assessment and then then
all these
implement.
assessments. So,
but I think also your film is very inspiring. So I think that one thing I could imagine a corporation, if their employees watch the film, that it will show people their own unconscious biases. Right? Because we all have them. We all have unconscious biases. And so I think seeing amputees in this very inspirational light would help people, as you said, you know, be more open-minded. Because I remember years ago, I was working at I guess I shouldn't say, anyway, an organization I would have thought was better. And I was on a hiring committee, and we were interviewing this Black woman for a director position. She was fabulous. And so we did the interview, and she left the room, and then there was a little conversation. And one of the other people on the hiring committee, a white man, said that we couldn't hire her because her English wasn't good enough. And I said, what? And he said, well, you know, her grammar. And I said, she didn't make any grammar mistakes. And he said, yes, she did. And I said, I'm an English teacher. And, you know, she didn't get the job. I contacted her. We were friends for the next couple of years. She was fabulous. It was an absolutely terrible decision that we didn't hire her.
Mhm.
And it was somebody's unconscious biases. He couldn't
Yeah.
even see it when it was pointed out to him.
Exactly. And well, that's all part of the ableism. It's like the company says, "Oh yeah, we're all for this," but when
Right.
it's down to it, we're, are you hiring, somebody with a disability in a leadership position?
Right.
Are you making the effort to, accommodate or provide, if they need a break, more breaks, or if they need, knowing that they have to go see their prosthetist or whatever. You're not going to hire someone just because maybe they have an extra or 2 extra doctor appointments to go to. I mean, they've got the skills, so don't let that hamper your decision. That's an ableist mindset where you say you'll do it, but then you don't put them in a role that they're qualified for. And yes, I'm hoping
Right.
that this film will, allow that and bring to light, because sometimes we aren't aware. It's like, oh, that's what that means. That's what ableism is. Oh no, I don't want to do that. No. Oh, that's what that is. That's what the problem is. So until you know what you know, then sometimes it's difficult to be in the right way. So
So after oh wait, didn't your film just get into a film festival?
it did. It's thank you. Palladino d'Or. It's a sports film festival in Sicily, Italy. And I'm very excited about it, because it's all about sports, all kinds of sports, from sports documentaries, sports narratives, short films, and it sounds fabulous. Sounds fabulous. So I think my husband and I
Yes.
were talking about going. We really are. They actually budget it. I just found out a lot of international film festivals budget a couple days stay, which this film has. They budget your hotel stay for anyone who was selected. So we're checking out prices, airline costs, we're checking out,
Right.
we're looking into it. And
What time of year? What dates is it, and
it's in
where in
December.
Italy?
It's in December.
Okay, so you got a minute to plan.
So yeah, so we're, but I have until the end of the month, to let them know, what we're gonna do. And
Okay.
I think, why not? Because that puts this on a bigger platform, the film, international. I mean, just think of, oh my gosh. And in Europe, um amputees, the competitions are so much more known there than they are in the
Oh.
States. United States
Oh.
has to catch up.
Haha.
But they still have, they have a lot of competitions where they don't in the United States. So, and I'm not going to go into all the details, but that's how you classify an athlete. You can't just put an athlete, let's say in swimming, if they have peripheral vision, you're not going to put them in the same race with someone who doesn't. So you look
Oh.
and see, like in Europe, where do they compete and what level do they compete in? And it's like, you don't want them sandbagging here in the United States and, winning just because they're in the wrong
Ah,
station.
okay. Oh,
So,
that's interesting. That's
but
something I
yeah,
didn't know
but
about.
in Europe, it seems like there's more awareness. So I'm very excited in that,
Yes.
that prospect of this film reaching more people, where people are actually aware.
I have to tell you a story, Marci. So
Yes,
years ago, before I was a coach, I was living in
yes.
Miami back then, and my friend's boyfriend found out that his feature film was accepted into a film festival in Italy. Now, it might have been Venice, in which case Venice is a very big festival, you know?
Okay.
And his girlfriend and I had to really get on his case about going, because he wasn't going to go. And and it was the only film festival that it got into.
Oh my gosh.
So we got on his case, He finally went to the film festival and showed the film. Somebody in the audience said to him, I love your film so much. I'm sorry, it was a short. That's right.
Okay.
It was a short.
Okay.
And it was a short about this woman who was from Colombia. It's a very Miami story. She was from Colombia. She came to America. She had a job cleaning, and she ended up at this site where there had been a murder. And there was where the police put the tape around the shape of the body.
Yeah.
And we find out that she's obsessed with murder. And then the murderer shows up, and it was a super fun film. I used to teach it when I taught short screenwriting. I used to use that film. And so this person was at the screening, and he said, I love your film so much. If you turn it into a feature film, I will executive produce it and get you the financing to make the film. That
Wow.
person's name was Quentin Tarantino.
No way.
And
That's so cool.
that person at the time, nobody knew him because he was at that festival right before going to Cannes, which was the festival where he suddenly became
Wow.
world famous with what's the film with the
Pulp? Is it? No, not Pulp Fiction.
No, it was earlier
This
than
is
that.
way before that.
Reservoir Dogs. Reservoir
Oh,
Dogs.
okay. Good.
That Reservoir Dogs was the film that made Quentin Tarantino, but this was about a week before that premiere happened.
Okay.
Right. So my friend, I just saw him the other day. My friend was there at the screening, and this stranger came up to him and said, if you write the script, I'll get you the financing.
Oh my
and
God.
he did.
What a great story. What a
He
great
did.
story.
Unfortunately, the feature wasn't as good as the short.
Oh.
But still, Quentin
Yeah.
Tarantino got $2.3 million. He said, I made Reservoir Dogs for $2.3 million, so I'm going to get you $2.3 million. And that was because he went to a film festival in Italy. He's still a filmmaker today. And I just saw him the other day.
Yeah, I think you always have to, that's one thing, you always have to be pitching. When you're a feature filmmaker, it's like with you 24 hours a day in that process. You always have to be pitching. You don't know where it's going to come from. And I was at a small film festival this year, was it? I think it was this year. And I went to a pitching place. And I think she's frozen. Is she frozen, Emily?
I think she is, but keep on with your story.
Okay.
Keep on with your story.
Like I was saying, you never know where it's going to come from. And she took an interest in the film and the concept. And she did end up investing. And you don't know where it's coming from. So I'm so glad that
I'm not hearing anything. Are you hearing me?
I'm so glad that Joanne and her friend convinced this guy to go to the festival, because you have to be out there. You got to be out there talking about the film and so forth. So that's one of the big aspects I think that's different from a short than a feature, is that you're constantly raising money, constantly thinking about how you're going to make it work. And that was so good, Joanne, that you convinced your friend to go, because you just don't know. You don't know where it's going to come from. And you have to be open to that. You have to be open to, you got to be having out of the box thinking, I believe, and especially today, when you're dealing with films and producing and distribution and fundraising. I think you have to be out of the box. I don't think you can do things necessarily the traditional way, but include some of those things to help you get there, and to continue, like crowdfunding, you're always going to be crowdfunding, but then add some other attributes to help raise the money. But you got to think out of the box with that.
I froze there for a while, so
Yeah,
I finally came back. But one of the things I always tell my clients is, for their film festival strategy, one, apply for a big one, whatever that is.
Okay.
2, apply in your niche, and then 3, apply locally. So you have found a niche, with a sports documentary
Yeah.
festival.
Yeah.
Imagine how many people you might meet that you want to work with in future. How many, who are they getting their films distributed by? Where are they getting funding from?
Good point. Good
when I
point.
sit in the theater and I'm watching a movie, at the end, I'm taking pictures
Oh,
of who funded their film.
great. Yeah, that's that's really, that's something I didn't think about. Going there. I've not been to I've never been to a film festival overseas before. So
Right.
those are some very good points to keep in mind to help further if I want to
Yes.
part 2.
Yes,
A part-
because I really get the feeling that you are going to be doing more. What in fact, I know you're still really working on this film, even though it's finished, but what might be your next film? Part
Oh,
2, as you just said?
well, I can't really discuss yet.
Oh, really?
I can't, it's
You
an
have something
idea.
you're working on.
It's an idea in my head.
Yeah,
I have several always, it's
sure.
like this idea for this film I had in my head about 4 years ago.
Ah,
And it took me a while to finally get there because I did some shorts.
right.
I always thought about this, but until I met you, I'm like, okay, it's time. It's time.
Cool. Do you think that you might do more sports work?
You know
Because it
what?
seems like,
I love it, Joanne.
yeah,
I really
yeah,
do.
yeah,
And so
yeah.
I'm like, it's like, you hear about so many filmmakers having their hand in like 2, 3, 4 projects at one time. I don't know how they do it. I honestly don't know how they do it. It takes 100% of my energy just for one,
Yeah, yeah,
with
absolutely.
really, but I always think in the back of my mind because I really have a passion for that.
Yes,
And there's so many opportunities, I believe,
yes,
in that. So
absolutely.
I'm not saying goodbye to it, but I do have other interests too that I've wanted to do for a while.
Right,
But
right.
we'll see. We'll see. Let me get through this. Let
Yes,
me let me start my impact, my grassroots community showing, and I'll keep you up to date with how that's going. And
absolutely,
um,
absolutely. Um, Thank you so much, Marci. I really appreciate this. I just love talking to you and listening to you talk about your films. I know for myself, I've found the thing in my life that gives me purpose, and gets me up in the morning, and it's helping filmmakers like you
oh,
to be successful with their films. It
thank
really is.
you. Yeah,
It
thank you so
really is.
much. Thank you so much. And really, definitely, you got to go with somebody who has actually experienced it. Don't recreate the wheel. And like, there's people like you who can offer some advice. I mean, I could probably talk to you for hours because you've just brought up some things that I didn't even know about you. And I've worked with you for a while. I'm like, oh my gosh, I'm still finding out things about you that I didn't even realize. It's like, oh, I need to talk to you about that. You know, like you just done so much, and you're going to bring a lot uh to the classes, people who want to learn how to do things. And yeah, so you've definitely found your purpose.
Yes. Well, thank you again, Marci. We'll be in touch. I definitely want to include your getting into that film festival in our next newsletter, which will be coming out on October the 1st. Emily's like laughing at me.
Oh, okay.
It's always supposed to be the first of the month, and it tends to be a few days after. But the goal is the first of the month. So we definitely want to include that in the
Okay,
newsletter.
super.
And thank you so much for spending some time with
Thank
us.
you. Thank you for having me. Nice to meet you.
Bye-bye.
Other two. Bye-bye.
Bye.